Hey, welcome everybody. It is another, we're a little hot on the mic here. Okay, another Automatic CSS Live. We are back. We took some time off doing these ACSS Lives because of 3.0, getting everybody transitioned, getting it super stable, yada, yada, yada. Now we're back. And these are very, at least in the past, ACSS Lives have been very, very popular. Obviously, our goal with this, one is we have an unprecedented commitment to education. And we know that as users, if you're not educated on how to use the tool, you probably just won't use it, right? Especially when a tool is more complex and maybe you're not a CSS expert, okay? So you rely on understanding how the framework works, how the features work, what should you expect it to do, not expect it to do, so on and so forth, right? So we're trying to do these ACSS live streams, and we're combining them, ACSS and Frames. We can tackle both of these things at once into a monthly event, essentially. So every single month, you'll have the ability to log on, come to a live stream, and get your questions answered, see the latest stuff, okay? Because we're constantly, CSS is constantly evolving. So a CSS framework has to constantly evolve. We're not just like packing new things in every idea that comes across the table. We're packing new things in that are very powerful and very helpful to users. But again, you have to know how those things work, or you're just not going to use them. So that's what this is for. Says Kevin, you should replace the miniature with V3 dashboard instead of V2. What are you talking about? What are you referencing? I'm not even sure. There's the comment right there from Darwin. Okay, so rules for this. I'm going to just open an install here. We're going to go over a couple things, just basics, okay? Just see where we're at, what's going on. But then we'll go into questions. Your question has to have a hashtag in front of it. Hashtag Q is probably the preferable one because that will give you more room to write your actual question. You can do hashtag question, but obviously it takes up more space. So hashtag Q is just fine. We will find your question. If it doesn't have a hashtag, we probably will not find it. Okay, Curtis, welcome. Erica, welcome. We got Terry here. We got Christoph's, WP Dev. Lyle is here. Okay, good stuff, good stuff. Andrea's in the house. Can't believe how much knowledge Kevin drops for free. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. That is the goal. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I'm just working off of a zipwp install here. And, oh, actually I can just close this. I'm already in there. I'm already in it. Okay. So first things first, accessing the Automatic CSS dashboard. Obviously in old versions, that was back here in a magic area under Automatic CSS. But if you click this now, you are no longer going to see the magic area. You're going to be able to manage your license here. You can import, export your settings here. You can get support links, okay? But the dashboard, which we added this, right? How do I get to the dashboard? The dashboard is on the front end or inside the builder, either way, but there's no more magic area. Automatic CSS lives where you work. You work on the front end, you work in the builder. That's where your work gets done. That's where Automatic CSS lives. And it lives in this dashboard right here that you can move anywhere you want. You can resize that. Something wrong with my mouse. You can resize it. You can dock it. So if you just grab it, and this is just basic stuff, right? If you just grab it by the logo, you can slam it against the edge and it will dock itself over there and expand. Same thing on this side. If you want to, now this will still cover up your content, right? But if you want to still see all of your site, you can pin the dashboard right here. And this is unpinned, which means it's still gonna cover up content. Pinned means it acts as a true, it's on the side of your website. So you can still see all of your website, no problem. You can pin it on either side. So you can pin over here, you can unpin. Very, very, should be basic. I actually float through these. Like I don't just leave it in one state. Sometimes I like it to float. Sometimes I like to see it. It depends on what I'm trying to do, what I'm working on, right? So feel free to, do whatever you want to do with it and change it up from site to site or from, work session to work session. One thing you have to understand is that it does try to remember, it does remember, it stores its last known position. It also stores its last known state. So if the last time you pulled up the front end, the dashboard was open, it's gonna be open again. If the last time you pulled it up it was closed, it's gonna be closed again. When you switch or you change screen sizes, obviously that's gonna mess with the dashboard's last known position perhaps. We do have a feature baked in where it attempts to, first it looks at the current screen size and essentially avoids collisions or avoids disappearing. Now, does that work 100% of the time? There could be use cases where it ends up where it's like, where did my dashboard go? It's very rare. It's very, very, very rare. But in the cases that does happen, you can always reset it. You can go inspect, application, local storage, okay, right here, right click, clear. So, and you can see the dashboard, there are some things in here, data related to the dashboard position, whether it's pinned or not pinned, open, not open. Just clear this out and it will just reset and you can start over, right? Very, very simple. But again, that's very rare cases that might happen. The other thing is people will look for the little indicator, right? Like I'm gonna go into the editor and you're gonna see the little floating indicator, okay? People get confused by why is the floating indicator there or not there. Essentially, there are two ways to open the dashboard. There's a physical button you can click. In the case of being on the front end, the button is in the admin bar. So you just click this, there you go, it's open. The secondary way is Shift Command O by default, and that opens. So you have a keyboard shortcut, you have a physical button. When you are in the builder, this is the easiest way to explain it. When you are in the builder or in areas where you have turned off the admin bar, you will see a floating button. Why? Because somebody, whether you or the builder, got rid of the admin bar button. That button no longer exists. There's got to be a button. So that button no longer exists. The button shows up as a floating button down here. Okay, this will trigger the dashboard. There's always got to be a button and there's always got to be a keyboard shortcut. So that is the logic for why you may or may not see the floating indicator. When the toolbar is available up here and there's a physical button, you're not going to see two buttons. There's no reason to have another one down here. You have the one right here. So as long as there's a physical button, we're good to go. And then the keyboard shortcuts, you can always customize on your own. So option, user shortcuts, you can customize all of these. So you don't like Shift Command O, no problem. You can easily customize it to something else. So that's the basics of opening the dashboard, moving the dashboard around, interacting with the dashboard, and the logic behind like why there's a floating button or not a floating button at any given time. Before we move on to that, let me just look at the chat before we move on from that, I should say. Let's see. Okay, all right. I just want to make sure there's nothing. Okay, sometimes when I pin the ACSS dashboard, when the header is sticky and scrolls up after some pixels, it messes up the header position in the moment you pin it. Is this normal or something wrong with my CSS? It's probably normal. The dashboard has to look and see what's going on the page, but it's not going to monitor the page the entire time, right? When you're interacting with the dashboard, that's when it's trying to check its position and what's going on the page. So if things happen after it's already checked, it's not going to be aware of those changes until you interact with the dashboard again. But yeah, okay. I think we're pretty good there. So let's just go through the basics of automatic CSS from a just overwhelm perspective, because I know that a lot of beginners, if you look at a dashboard like this, okay, and I could go into some panels like this, and you could just easily start to say to yourself, man, there's just so much here. I'm never going to be able to learn it all, or I'm never going to be able to use it all, right? And that's actually not true. It would be a false premise, and I'm gonna explain why. Automatic CSS has sensible defaults for everything out of the box. It does not require any configuration to work and to function and to be usable. It only requires adjustments and configuration if you want to change something based on your preferences. So it's not that, oh, that thing's not gonna work, right? It's that if I want it to work differently, I can go adjust it, but it is gonna work right out of the box, okay? So I tried to explain this in the first video in ACSS 101. You could install Automatic CSS and then just start using the utility classes and variables without ever touching this dashboard. There is literally nothing really to configure. And everything that is configurable, for the most part, can even be configured as you work on a project. Or in some cases, I mean, if you know what you're doing, could be completely configurable after you're finished with the project. That's what's crazy about Automatic CSS is that it doesn't require you to get everything right before you start working. What is required is you follow the process and the workflow. So if you're not using, for example, we're gonna go into spacing here, contextual spacing. Like if you use grid gap and content gap and container gap in the places you're supposed to use them, you can change these values at any time. But if you don't use these utilities when you're building, and you, for some reason, just use static values or something, then you're not gonna have the control over it. This area is not gonna work, right? So the only important part that you get right is just the workflow. The workflow of, okay, I'm using BIM classes, I'm using Automatic CSS variables in my values. I'm not just coming up with random values of my own. So instead of, putting a gap of 20 pixels, I need to use a gap of space M or a gap of, more appropriately, content gap. So as long as you're doing that in your workflow, the dashboard stuff is gonna come at any point, okay? You can interact with this stuff at any point. But I wanna go through it real quick, just layout, website dimensions, your content width is set here, your breakpoints are all configurable here, header heights, which is one area we need to talk about. This really only applies, this header height area, if you're gonna do a sticky header or like a scrolling header, that's the only time you need to interact with this. You can complete, if you're just gonna do a normal header, you're not gonna do anything fancy with your header, you can pretty much ignore this area right here, okay? Content grid, we could talk about auto grids, box layout. Box layout's very rare, okay? Unless you're actually gonna deploy it, that's another area you can just ignore, right? Box layouts I think they're gonna come back. They're gonna make a comeback at some point. But right now, it's very rare that you would do a box layout. Colors is the main area you're gonna wanna interact with. Like right off the bat, I would say, go here. This is one of the first areas that I go on a new project because I wanna configure my colors so that as I'm building, I'm actually seeing the correct colors. Do you have to do it in the not really, not technically, but it is easier because you can see the real colors you're gonna be working with. So getting these configured, and you're welcome to ask whatever questions you want to ask about colors. There's a lot of documentation on colors, but just understanding, like, I think maybe the biggest point of confusion here is instead of using shades, people try to use extra colors, and that's actually not the approach you should use. If two colors, okay, there's the quotes, have the same hue, they're not two different colors. They're not two different colors. They're just different shades of the same color. So you really need to be looking at, if like a designer gives you a color palette, very notorious that people will look at this thing over here and this thing over here as two separate colors, when actually if you looked at their hue, they're the exact same hue. They're just radically different shades, which is radically different lightness and saturation values. Those are the same color, right? You just need to use the shades of the given color, and then you're not gonna run out of colors. People that say, I'm running out of colors, almost always are configuring their colors wrong. They're not pairing the same hues together as they should be. But again, that's areas that we can talk about. Color scheme, if you're not doing dark mode, light mode, you don't even have to worry about that area. Semantic colors, I leave them off until you absolutely need it. You don't need to touch this area until it's absolutely needed. Like it's, oh, I'm gonna create an alert and I want the warning color. Okay, come here and configure it at that time. Don't worry about this stuff ahead of time. Spacing is always very, like, I can't tell you, I almost never, small minor adjustments here. There's not much you have to touch here. it's all sensible defaults and it all kind of just works. Buttons and links, very easy to configure. We can talk about like customizing buttons. If you're trying to do something special or fancy, there's probably questions around that. If you're creating some standard buttons, pretty much gonna work out of the box for you. Backgrounds and text is an area we probably need to touch on. That's probably an area not enough people are using. Very powerful, not enough people are using it. I think for the most part, people understand buttons and links. They understand spacing. They understand typography. They understand color palette as long as they're not making mistakes there. Backgrounds and text is one of the areas that people might avoid because they're like, I'm not really sure how this works. So that's probably an area we need to touch on for sure. Borders and dividers is an area that I think people are doing manually still, that they should not be doing manually. They should be leveraging this section. So on today's live, I'm gonna focus here heavily, backgrounds and text, borders and dividers, because this is an area where I think people are not getting the most use out of ACSS where they could be, and they're doing a lot of this stuff manually and they shouldn't be, okay? And then in additional styling, you know, other than box shadows, you can pretty much, there's not a lot you have to do in this area. And then if you're using forms, that should be obvious. I'm gonna focus heavily on backgrounds and text and borders and dividers here, other than what you guys are gonna be asking in terms of questions. And again, you can ask pretty much about anything. So I'm gonna go look through chat real quick here. I'm going to then go into backgrounds and text and borders and dividers, and then we'll go straight to questions. Let's see, Automatic.css is the most forgiving framework ever. Is as pro as you want it or novice as you want it to be? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, remember when every site had a box layout in like 2011? Yes, yes. It's gonna, trust me, it's gonna come back, especially as monitors get like 8,000 pixels wide. A box layout actually comes, it solves a lot of problems on giant screens. And I think a lot of that utility of the box layout, like there's box layout for, ooh, I think it's cool. I like how it looks. But then there's a lot of utility that actually comes with it. For managing how your website looks on giant screens, it's actually very good. So I think it's gonna come back a lot. Let's see. Okay, cool. Where can I see that? Oh yeah. Then there's a lot of advanced stuff, obviously, that we can talk about. Mix-ins, functions, using the custom Sass area. Like, yeah, there's a lot of advanced stuff. So if you're free to ask about any of that, and we'll go over it. Let's take a look at backgrounds and text first, because again, this is one of those areas. It's a relatively new area compared to other things. And it has a very important and powerful feature, but it may not be super obvious right from the jump, okay? So I think this is an area that we really have to talk about. I want more and more and more people, because we also have textures and overlays now, which kind of leverage this feature. More people should be using this stuff. So if I'm building out a page, here's a section, right? I'm just gonna put a bunch of sections on the page. Think in terms of delete all the content and just think in terms of sections and how colors are applied. Typically, you're working with like base colors where, okay, that section's got a dark background. Most of them, maybe most of them are light. This one has a dark background. Or most of them are dark. This one has a light background. More rarely, you would have like colored, like primary color backgrounds or a radically different colored background, right? Most often it's described in dark and light. And that doesn't just mean black and white. That could be, okay, we have our primary color is, we're using a very dark shade of that for some of our backgrounds. And then our light backgrounds, we're using a very light shade of primary. That could be the case for you. But it's still looked at and interpreted as, okay, most of these things are dark or most of these things are light, right? And so what we have in Automatic CSS is a backgrounds and text system that takes colors, because you have a color palette right here. Here's colors that you can configure. But if you're just gonna go use colors willy-nilly, we don't really know the context of how they're being used. We just know that they're the names of them and the names are being deployed in all these random places. But we actually lose control doing that. You very quickly it starts to become a little bit chaotic. A better way to handle it is when you're assigning colors, assign them based on their context. So what this backgrounds and text area does is it defines a lot of context for how you are deploying colors. And it actually takes the name of the color when you're building out of the equation. which is actually very helpful when you come back to projects later to manage the project and you're creating new things. You don't have to look up like, oh, are we using the primary light here or the primary ultralight here or the primary semi-light here or what? Like, you're trying to figure things out. In this system, you actually don't have to figure anything out because what we do is we create a website background color. This is the entire background for your website. What color is that going to be? Most websites, that's white, or it's a very light color. Or if it's a dark theme, by default, it'll be a very dark color, right? And then we have 4 options, essentially, for what you're gonna be choosing as you build. So it's like, all right, I want my dark background here, or I want my ultra dark background here, or I want my light background here, or I want my ultra light background here. Now, by default, these are mapped to blacks, whites, and grays, right? But that's the thing. You get to define whatever you want here. And you could actually redefine this at any time to re-theme the entire website. But what you need to understand is you're using these utilities as you go. And we've talked about utility classes before, when and where you should use them and shouldn't use them. This is a perfect use case for utility classes. So when I come here, I want this to be my default section background. But this section, I want it to be my ultra dark. So I'm going to do BG. And I'm going to do ultra dark. And now it's an ultra dark section. And these can be light. Maybe down here, I want my ultra light. So I'm going to say BG ultra light, okay? So, and then these are going to be base. And then my last section down here, I want it to be ultra dark as well. So now this is going to be, if you removed all the content, this might be a situation where you run into. A lot of the sections use the standard, whatever your default website color is. But then you have some that are darker, some that are lighter, and that creates these separations between the sections. That's all this is doing at a base level, okay? Notice I didn't choose any colors. And so now what's gonna happen is, let's say I did, let me get to the front end here, okay? Let's say I did want to actually theme this somehow. So I have a primary color, right? Okay, so we're gonna go to backgrounds and text, and I'm gonna go to backgrounds, and say ultra dark is actually going to be primary ultra dark, right? And then my ultra light is actually gonna be primary ultra light. So let's say that this is a theme where we are actually using the primary color for different backgrounds. All you have to do is assign those values to those contexts. Okay, my ultra dark backgrounds are going to be primary ultra dark. You could even make it primary dark. They don't have to, the name here doesn't have to match the name here. You're just dialing this into whatever you want. And look how the site is just re-theming itself as I do this. And so you have a standard, even if your base color, right, became something else, primary ultra light. Okay, now all of them are here. Now your ultra light would not be the same color. So you could do primary light here. And now look at that. My website background color has changed, and my ultra lights and my ultra darks have changed their values as well. And I completely retheme the website. Very, very safe, very good control, even after a website is completely finished being built. So this is how this works, essentially. Now, what is the next layer of this? That's just backgrounds. Then we have text that we can do, okay? So let me go ahead and we'll save this for now. And what I'm gonna do is go back into the builder. I'm gonna refresh so that the builder gets all those updates as well. Okay, so now here's what we're working with. So now the same is true for text. Whenever I'm adding text or I'm adding a heading or something like this, text is a little bit different in that for the most part, you want either your default text color for things, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna set this here. So let's go back to the front end. It's easiest to do this on the front end because all the builder controls go away and we can see more cleanly what we're looking at. But this will all work in the builder. It's just getting rid of the builder interface is easier for people to understand what's going on here. All right, so I'm gonna go to backgrounds and text again, and this time I'm gonna go to text, and notice very similar. Just like we had a default website background color, we have a default text color for the website. And with text colors, we're handling it a little bit differently. You do have dark, and you do have light, but there's also a muted version of text for both light and dark. And so I've got text dark muted set right here, which the value is coming from right here. And so I wanna say, like, see how this text right here is getting lighter and lighter and lighter? You wanna control color contrast between headings and body text. That in design, that's just a good thing to do. You don't want your headings and your body text to be the same contrast typically, because it makes it hard to decipher visually what's a heading versus what's text. Now you have the size contrast, but it's good to have both a size contrast and a color contrast. So this is where muted and not muted really come into play. My headings, I don't want it to be muted, right? My text, I want my text to be muted, and then I can control the degree using transparency of the mutedness. Now, does you have to use transparency? Nope. No, you don't have to. You can use the shades. You can use shades for achieving this contrast. But I find that transparency is just a very easy out of the box way to do it. And so that's why that's the default. But you're gonna wanna find color contrast ratios, obviously, that make sense. But this is a good way to control that contrast ratio. All right, so I've got my default, because this is a mainly light site, is set to dark text. And then for my muted, I've got my value here, and then dark is just gonna be black. But I could say on this website, actually, I want this to be using my primary color. I could do primary, but because I want it to be dark, I could do dark here. And that actually, that's a good look, okay? So see how I'm able to re-theme based on the context of anything using dark text is now gonna be primary colored, but it's gonna be the dark version of primary. And that's gonna update everywhere. That's gonna update everywhere. Okay, now same thing with dark muted. I actually want primary ultra dark trans 60. So I've taken, instead of using a gray for my text, because I'm not using gray anywhere else on this theme, I'm actually gonna use the primary color, but I'm gonna use the ultra dark version, and then I'm gonna use the transparency of 60% to dial in the contrast ratio that I want. So that's no longer using a gray, which doesn't really match the theme. It's using a version of primary that does match the theme, and I'm setting that all up from right here, just assigning these colors to how they're going to be used on the website. And at any time, we can change our primary color. All of this is gonna re-theme itself. We can change to using secondary in all these places without having to, imagine this. Imagine you actually wanted to change all this to the secondary color. Well, if you had deployed, when you initially built the website, deployed secondary tokens everywhere, like text secondary, BG secondary, BG, everything secondary, you're out of luck. You got to go replace all those references to secondary. You got nowhere to go. But with this, because I'm assigning colors to a context, I can reassign the context at any time I want. I'm not limited. I don't have to go back. The tokens that I used are going to still be the tokens that I used. The classes that I use are still going to be the classes that I used. I just get to redefine them right here. Okay, so this opens the door. It might take a little bit more to wrap your head around, but in terms of maintainability and scalability and retheming the website at any time, this gives you a lot more flexibility going forwards, okay? So it's the safest approach, and it also happens to be, once you understand it, easier to build your sites. Because when I go through, I'm not like, do I use primary? Do I use base? What? I just go BG dark, BG dark, BG dark, BG ultra dark, BG ultra dark, BG ultra dark, BG light, BG ultra light. You're just flying through making these decisions, right? And then, of course, you can redo it at any time. So very, very, very good flexibility here. Now, let's talk about this option, okay? I'm gonna turn this off for a second. So in this panel, normally, what you're gonna see, let me go to backgrounds and text. You're gonna see backgrounds, text, and options. That's all you're gonna see, okay? Open up options, because we're about to unlock a very, very powerful feature of Automatic CSS that's not available in any other framework. And you should absolutely be using this because it helps tremendously, and it just does a lot of work for you, okay? You're gonna turn on this little toggle that says automatic color relationships. And that's gonna bring two new panels into play, light relationships and dark relationships. And before you do anything here, you can actually just hit save, and then you can go back to the builder, and I want you to add things in to a dark section or an ultra dark section, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the builder. We'll do a little refresh here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a heading, and I'm gonna add text, if I can hit the right shortcuts. Text, I'm gonna add a button, and I'll even add a link, okay? Let's add a text link here. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is you put your normal button primary or whatever on here. And then you can make sure that this has a URL. So custom URL here. All right, save, perfect. So remember, this is an ultra dark section. Did you notice that I did not tell any of these things to change color, right? Notice that they are automatically light. Why are they automatically light? Because automatic CSS knows I'm working in an ultra dark section. It would never give me ultra dark text in an ultra dark section when I have this feature on. If you turn the feature off, it'll do what most builders do and most frameworks do, which is force you to manually change these colors, right? Now, I'm gonna show you it's very easy to demonstrate. I'm gonna remove BG Ultra Dark. Do you see what happens to the text? The text is now dark. Because the BG Ultra Dark is gone, it's gonna go back to the default. But the minute I say, hey, this is an ultra, look at the light, it changes instantly, right? I can even just hover over that. You see it? Seamless, right? You don't have to do any work. Now, you obviously might want to customize this, right? So I'm gonna hit save. I'm gonna go back to the front end. And now we're gonna talk about backgrounds and text, dark relationships. I'm in an ultra dark section. I can control how these things are behaving within this context. I can say, hey, I want my text. I don't know why I would do this. This would be dumb. But look, red, I just use red because it's easy to see what's happening, right? So you can control what the text color is when you're using the ultra dark class. Okay, so in all of your ultra dark sections, this is how the text is going to be styled automatically. What about your heading color here? You can do the exact same thing. And you should be choosing any values that you want that make sense. Your link color even can be changed, okay? So there's your text link. And if you click this little arrow, notice it says edit hover state. You also have control over the hover state of these links. I don't think I'm gonna get live preview until, you gotta save this to actually make the live preview work. But your text links would be green on hover. So you have the main link color and the hover color are configurable for this relationship. And then even with your button style, right? And you guys know that we have primary light buttons, we have primary button outlines, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and save and see if we can get this configured. We wanna get to, let's see, buttons and links. So there you go. I have my, outline variant when I'm in BG Ultra Dark. And you can choose any other button variant that you want. The thing you have to know here about the relationships, and go back to backgrounds and text, you're just calling an existing button style. So number one, it has to exist. If you don't have that style turned on in buttons and configured, then it's obviously not gonna work because it's only gonna call active button styles. If you want the outline version, you simply attach the button outline utility class to the style you're calling, okay? But yeah, this should work for any. The only thing I don't remember off the top of my head is if I have to do quotes. Sometimes you have to do quotes. Let's see how it works here. Reload site, yes. So okay, it's working without quotes. So I'm asking for the primary light colored button, and I'm getting my primary light button style. Now, let's configure this to something that actually looks decent. We don't want to use red here, okay? So my text color, let's say primary semi-light, okay? There you go. And then I'm not gonna say this is gonna look good. I'm just gonna show you, okay, what we can do. Primary, let's do it backwards. Let's do primary semi-light here, and then primary light here, okay? And then we have that, and then let's do primary, let's just keep primary for our links. Primary for our links. Needs a little more contrast. There we go, that'll work, okay? Save. So now let's go back to the builder. Let's refresh. And now let's just take off the BG Ultra Dark class again. So everything goes back to what it was as the default, but when I apply BG Ultra Dark, I get all my relationships that I would expect. Even my button changes to like the light version of the button to help me out there. So this is existing for every single relationship pair in the system. So when I go to backgrounds and text, what are my options? Dark, ultra dark, light, ultralight. Those all have relationships. Ultralight and light relationships, ultra dark and dark relationships, all configured from right here. This is gonna save you a tremendous amount of time. And then again, in the reconfiguring later, if things need to be refactored a little bit, you are going to be able to refactor these relationships site-wide from one spot. So the amount of rework that you would have to do to refactor, when Bev calls, when that phone rings, and you got Bev on the other line, and she's talking her mad shit ideas, right? And I just want to see it. Just show it to me, right? That you've had that conversation, right? You can be like, all right, Bev, I'll show it to you. It's no problem, right? Super easy to do. So tremendous control. All right, yeah, some people saying one of my favorite features. I'm just kind of going through this because I don't want you to be scared of a feature like this. You can absolutely learn it, experiment with it, and use it, and then it's gonna be one of those things where you're like, I don't know how I built sites before this thing existed. That's gonna be the conclusion you ultimately come to, okay? All right, let's see here. And then, yeah, you can, that's the good thing about it, right? Let's say you set these relationships, okay? Because somebody asked, what is the fastest way to check your text background color contrast for accessibility? This is a great question, and it actually highlights the usefulness of this feature. Let's say you create your relationships and then you use them everywhere on the site. And then an accessibility person comes along, or you do your accessibility check and you're like, oh, fuck, all of the text in our ultra dark sections are failing accessibility. Let me show you something. You open the dashboard, right? You go to your ultra dark relationship, your text color right here, and you go from light to semi-light or whatever. Or you can actually just change the value of that shade that you happen to be using a little bit, make a little adjustment. But typically you might wanna go with a lighter shade or a darker shade here. You update it right here, and you just fixed every instance of the ultra dark sections and relationships that you've used throughout this entire site. So in a split second, you just fixed all the accessibility issues with that relationship pair. And then you need to go on to the dark one. Is the dark passing or failing? Is my light passing and failing, right? And make the adjustments from this one area, and it's fixing your entire website. Your entire website is being resolved for accessibility contrast, okay? That is, again, the power of this feature. That people may not see right off of the jump, right? You don't realize that until you built an entire website and you go, fuck, we messed that up with the color contrast. Well, Automatic.css, like the gentleman said a minute ago, the most forgiving framework, if you actually use it the way it's designed, the most forgiving framework you could possibly use, because mistakes and errors, as long as you use the right variables, right, can be fixed like that from one spot. Okay. Borders and dividers. I'm gonna save this. We're gonna go do some questions, and then we'll come back and do borders and dividers, and then we'll do another set of questions. But I wanna get to some Q&A before we move on, because this is a lot to digest right here. If you're not gonna deploy it on your next project, I would highly recommend you at least experiment with it in some of your off time. Just play around with it and see exactly what it does. Then you're gonna have the question in your mind. I won't go through all of this, but I am just gonna raise the thing in your mind, because some people are gonna reject this and be like, Kevin, this is not gonna work for me. I love to use background patterns, and this is just, I don't like these solid color things. I like gradients, I like patterns. Okay, no problem. Because backgrounds and text, options, textures, and overlays opens up this entire world of using patterns and gradients while maintaining the auto color relationships with the foreground elements, okay? So you have all textures, patterns, gradients, whatever even animated gradients, you can do using our new backgrounds or our textures and overlays feature. And all of these map to color relationships. So your foreground is still going to be able to be related and configured to work with your patterns, your textures, and your gradients, okay? So there is no limitation anymore. All right, let's go down and let's do some questions before we move on to the next part. So we're gonna go #Q. Okay, in the overlay menu, I wanted to do a transparent background, but the system didn't work consistently. Can you show us how to do that? Transparent back. Do you have an example, SK, of the pattern or overlay you're trying to achieve? If you can give me an example, then I can walk you through it. There's so many options for doing background textures and overlays that I gotta see what we're trying to achieve, and then I can show you where the sticking point might be. All right, let's go. I lost my search. Okay, let's go back. How do I style icons in lists with ACSS rather than bricks? In preview, the list icons are styled the way I want them, but then brick styles are overriding on the live side. Okay, good question. This is not really an ACSS question as much as it is a bricks question. I'm gonna delete all of these. I'm gonna bring, and actually let me go, I wanna fix our backgrounds and text here. I'm just gonna reset all this, okay? Which is another, nice thing. You can just quickly undo a bunch of stuff that you did. And let's go light relationships. That can be reset. Okay, let's reset all this stuff. Link color, reset that too. Okay. I don't think I changed anything else. All right, save. And let's get out of here. Okay. The problem with icons and bricks, there's two problems with icons. And then one of them is because of bricks, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add there's another thing too, is are you adding via the icon element or via the SVG element? That's another little wrinkle, okay, in what we're talking about here. I think most people use the icon element, so that's what I'm gonna do. If you use a icon set like these, like Font Awesome or whatever, the output on the front end is actually different. So is your icon an SVG? Or is it outputting as like an I element? And then if it is an SVG, here's all the things you have to consider. You actually have to know what you're adding, right? Because not every icon is built the same. Some of them are I elements that can actually be controlled with font color. Some of them are SVGs that are controlled with fills. Some of them are SVGs that are controlled with paths. Some of them are SVGs controlled with, what's the other? There's one other option, okay? So there's like 4 different ways the icon can be added to the site. The number one thing you have to understand is how is this one being added? Oh, stroke. Stroke is the other one. Because the way an icon is built, and if I go to like huge icons, for example, a lot of these use stroke for the color, but then a lot of other icon sets use fill for the color. And then if you're mixing and matching icon sets, some of your icons might be using fill, some of your icons might be using stroke. And you see where the complication comes from. And there's no easy way to get around this complication. You just have to know that these options exist in icons, and you have to assess the icon that you happen to be using at the time in order to know where you can control its color. Now, the bricks downside of all of this is that bricks, if you open icon here, there's actually a bunch of limitations that you have to work around as well. And these are builder limitations, okay? It says color. It's not telling you, is that fill? Is that stroke? Is that path? Is that font color? What the hell does that mean right there? And then if you open this icon panel, if you're doing an SVG, for example, let me see if we have one. Let's do a huge icons real quick, okay? Let's do help. Okay, so we're just gonna take this icon right here, and we're gonna download the SVG. And what Bricks allows you to do is it allows you to upload an SVG. So we're gonna go folders, create icons. I don't want it in fonts, all right? And then what we're gonna do is find where's my Finder window? Where you at? Finder, new Finder window. Okay, there we go. So downloads, here we go. So I'm just gonna pull this in, bang, and we're gonna insert it. Awesome. So now I just put in a custom SVG. Not super awesome though, because if I get rid of this panel that I'm looking at, I still see this color panel. But if I open this panel, now it's like, oh my God, there's a stroke, there's a fill, there's like, what do I do? What do I do? Where do I put the things? And here's another downside, okay? My icon, great. If you fill out these with actual values and then you go add another icon and use the class my icon, it ain't gonna work. Bricks fails to map these things to this class. I don't know if it's a bug. I don't know if it's a limitation of how the styling is applied to classes and reaching icons. Don't know. I haven't cared. All I know is it doesn't work. So it's a big problem, right? So let's go here to color and just see, what does this do? Obviously, that's not what we want. That appears like it's adding that color to the fill, okay? And now we just see a bullet. We don't see an actual icon, right? Okay, can't do it that way. So now I'm gonna go to stroke color. Let's do fill down here because I'm pretty sure this one's not gonna work either. oh, look, a completely different scenario. It actually did fill it this time. So the other one might be doing like font color, okay? This is filling it, but there's also, that's not really what I want to do. I want to change the stroke color. So I'm going to get it out of here and I'm going to put this value right here. And notice this is not an ACSS thing. I'm using raw values. I'm just showing you the limitations of page builders and handling icons, okay? And how you have to decipher what actually is going on here. So now stroke color, again, this doesn't map to the class. So what I do, here's what I do to get around this. I use a placeholder called stroke color. Okay, that is a variable called stroke color. And then what I do is I go to custom CSS on my icon because this will be properly attached to the class. And I define stroke color as whatever I want, okay, like primary. And so now I have a primary colored icon. And now if I add another icon here, and I put that next to it, right? And I say, all right, let me go get that custom SVG again. Bang, okay? And it's gonna be black by default. But now if I say my icon, it should in fact change to, oh, you know what? That's the other limitation. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It actually loses the whole value together, okay? So I was trying to remember what we did in frames. I think what we do in frames, in frames what we do is this. It's actually we do an extra step. I'm pretty sure we target the SVG color or something like that, and then do stroke and then stroke color or something like that. One of these if you look at frames, frame shows you how to do it. And we had to figure it out. And it actually comes in with you have a fill color option, which might actually just default to transparent so it doesn't mess with anything. And then you have an actual color option in case it uses font color. It's a whole fucking disaster scenario. So I do empathize with you, but that is the approach, is using custom CSS essentially. To get around that. It's one of the worst parts of bricks. And I don't know why it hasn't been fixed. Don't know what the limitations are or what the issues are, but that's a synopsis of why it's a shit show. Okay, let's go to defining the font. Oh, what is the advantage of defining the font family in the ACSS settings instead of the theme style? Did that actually put that on the screen? There we go. Okay, so you can set font family here. I'm gonna bring this out here. Typography, headings, font family, text, font family, right? I believe you can even go into each individual heading level, and if you wanted or needed to, set one for each individual level. Same thing I think we're bringing that to text, but for text right now, we rejected the idea of doing that for text initially because it really probably shouldn't be done all that much. You would mainly do it with like block quote, for example, or for italic text, but not a text size. Like, I don't think your font family should be changing just because the size got smaller. It's probably, more often than not, you would be doing something wrong. But with headings, it could be common. Like if you want a different font for your H1, like your hero headings or something versus your H2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, or your 3s are all gonna be different. That is more valid of a scenario, so we did it there. Now, what is the advantage? Because you could do it here. You could go to theme styles and you could go to typography and bricks and you could set your body font family here, your headings font family here. You could do it for the individual heading levels, I believe. Yeah, all of these, H2, you can open this and do it here. For me, it is the value of having it all in one place. It's not like, oh, ACSS controls all my typography, except I gotta go over here to do font stuff, right? So that's one advantage. There is a downside though. One thing I think you should know is if you, for example, let's say you set a different H3 here. If you don't use an H3 on this page, I'm fairly certain it's not going to load that font file, okay? And so if you try to load a custom font that you're gonna do with H3s, and then put it in ACSS, you have to make sure Bricks is actually loading that file. If Bricks for some reason decides to not load that file, Automatic CSS obviously can't call that file, okay? Or reference that file. So you have to make sure that it's actually using it. And if you want to do custom fonts in bricks, that is done in the magic area, way back here. You got to go way back here, over here, and custom fonts. And this is where you can load in custom fonts. You're still free to use this. You just have to make sure bricks is actually in queuing it. But it's really just preference. At the end of the day, it should work either way. It's up to you. We added it not because it was needed, but because a lot of people requested it. They were tired of managing their fonts separately in bricks when they were doing everything else in Automatic CSS. That's kind of the story there. Okay. Can you please show how to use the frame slider Juliet? I'm not sure how to use the dynamic data part. Yeah, we can get to that in a minute. We'll do ACSS stuff first, come back to frame stuff. Sometimes when I pin the ACSS dashboard, okay, we talked about that one. Any planned styling for SureCart, SureMembers plugins? Yes. With the new texture, feature, background overlay, if I use an SVG image, is there any way to control the color and opacity, tokenize it maybe? It depends on whether you're using it as a background or an overlay. If you need to do stuff with opacity and SVGs, I would almost always deploy it as an overlay because you have the opacity option by default. So if you go to, and this is a limitation of CSS, not a limitation of Automatic CSS. So if I go to backgrounds and text and I go to options and I turn on textures and overlays, if I'm doing background texture 1 and here's my asset. So I put an SVG in here. The SVG if it doesn't have transparency of its own, then I have to apply transparency. If you are using your texture as a background, you are now entering into a zone where you have CSS limitations because there is no background opacity option in CSS. It doesn't exist. If you put opacity on a layer that is using a background, the opacity applies to everything in that layer, even text, headings, images, everything. So that's obviously not going to work. However, when you use the overlay option, so enable overlay class, you still have access to another overlay on top of that overlay, which is very unique. You have access to blend mode now, and then you also have a default opacity. So you can control the opacity here, and because this is an overlay on what you're doing, even if it's showing up behind it, it has the ability to have opacity. And again, it's just CSS. Like this is, you can only do what CSS allows you to do, right? We can't make up stuff like, oh, here's a dream. Well, that's a fantasy world, right? We still have to exist within the confines of CSS. Okay. I created a list item. I have links in the list, and they're not automatically picking up my link color. There's no classes anywhere overriding that I can find. Any ideas where to look next? All right, so this is going to be Arcane's question right here. Let's take a look at that. Let me turn this off for now. Let's go to options, turn that off. Okay, and save. All right, so it is important to see examples. When people ask questions like this, we just see, does it work out of the box? So if it works out of the box, it means something else is going on with that particular setup or install. And there's multiple ways that we can do a list here. I'm gonna do one with a rich text element. So we're gonna go here. This is gonna be my list. Okay, so I have a list item, list item, list item, right? And I'm gonna make these links. So we're gonna go here, make that a link. And you see right off the bat, we're getting global link color is being applied properly. Let's go to the front end and double check it. There you go. So that is lists happening properly. So he is saying, I have links in the list. They're not automatically. Okay, let's do lists one other way. And so we could just test one other scenario that he might be using. And this would be with a div. Okay, so you use a div and you change it to a list, like unordered list. And then you add another div in here. And this div is actually going to be the list item. So we're going to change that to an LI. And then you would put a text element or actually a link element inside of there. And you would say custom URL, #. Okay, there it goes. It did take effect. And now if you want to, this would be the LI. This would be the UL. So you duplicate a bunch of LIs and you're gonna get the rest of your list, and then we can refresh and we still see the text color being properly applied. So I would say we're going to need a link to see what's going on with your section, because out of the box, it works just fine. Okay. And you can't share a link in the chat. It's going to, you'll see it, but nobody else will see it. It scrapes it out. So you're going to have to just go into the ACSS community, create a post for this, and then we can jump in and help you. Can you speak about the hover states of buttons indicator? I know some in the community were confused about the decision to go with an icon for indication of state change. I don't know what you're referring to right off the bat. The hover states of button indicator. I know some in the community were confused about the decision to go with an icon for indication of state change. By default, the state change indication of a button is hover color. So out of the box with automatic CSS, let's put this button up here. We're going to give it a button class, okay? Oh, I put BG instead of button. Let's do button and then choose primary, okay? So there's your primary button. And if we go view this on the front end, you see that we have a hover color change, and that is the default indication of a button change. Now, when you bring icons into play, it's going to be a little bit different of a scenario, because you're going to go back into all of the icon problems we just talked about a minute ago, where you have to know what kind of icon you're adding. Is it using fill, stroke, or whatever? And then you have to make adjustments accordingly, because automatic CSS also just can't guess, right? This is where you have to step in and say, okay, I see what kind of icon I'm using and what it needs, and I'm most often going to write some custom CSS for that. All right. Icons are a shit show in web design. They are just, that is their natural state of being, is the natural state of shit show. They're really tough to work with. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on configuring colors and people saying they run out of colors. The best way to do it is when people give me palettes. Like, here's the palette I was given. How do you configure this in ACSS? I mean, I could do a whole episode dedicated to that, and maybe we should at some point. But yeah, that's the easiest way to do it. Okay, would it be possible to add more shades? I like to use Tailwind's palette generator that generates 11 shades total. Is it possible? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's possible. And I can show you how to easily do it, okay? There's the cheap way to do it, and then there's the correct way to do it. But what I challenge people on is, do you really need to use that many shades? What I would encourage people to do, go to geary.co/blog for this. And I wrote a very detailed article. You should absolutely read this. The case against numbered shades in design systems. And it's something similar to this, right? Where people have 9 different shades to choose from, and they all have these static numbers, okay? When I'm saying detail, okay, I'm making a case here, and it is a very detailed case. And you should read it just so you understand, like, theory, color theory, deploying colors in web design, so on and so forth. Very detailed article. You'll learn a lot when you read it. But in most cases, there are a small group of shades that you're going to deploy everywhere. And then very uncommonly, you'd like, all right, in this like one-off scenario, I need a little bit different, okay? That is easy to solve for. I would not programmatically try to have a bunch of different shades options for every project that you do, because so many are going to go unused. Or if you're using them all, it's just going to look like chaos in most cases, right? It's not going to be a good design result. And I've gone through website after website after website, production websites from big to small, and showed, guys, they're using 3 shades, 4 shades. They're using 3 shades, 4 shades. They're not using 9 different shades for the vast majority of what they're doing with the project, right? And it's way easier to build, and it's typically a better design outcome when you have guardrails and limitations on these things, like text sizes, like spacing values, like shades, okay? The more that show up and appear as options, the more chaos there is in the project. And nobody can make the case that that's a better outcome, okay? Like visually, we only would have won that design award because we have 80 different font sizes being deployed here. No, that's simply typically you're not gonna win the design awards by doing that, right? Or we had to have 12 shades here, or this never would have come together. It's just not an argument that I've ever seen people be able to make, right? So that would be the first thing. Like, some people are just like, I hate guardrails. Like, why? Guardrails are actually very helpful. Now, if you want to create another shade, let's go here. You're going to do this in the custom CSS area. There's actually a few different ways to do this. We're doing some mix-ins. You go the mix-in route, you can go the function route, you can go the manual route. There's a lot of different, and this is all documented. So if you go to the colors area of the documentation, it gives you step-by-step, here's how to create a new shade if you need to create a new shade, okay? One thing I would say to use, first of all, do this at the root level so that you have this globally available to your entire website, right? Let's say I wanted to create first this transparency. Let's just do it because that's actually easier to handle, right? It's more common that you would need to dial in a custom transparency than a custom shade, in my opinion, right? So let's say you wanted to do primary trans 15. So we have a 10 and we have a 20. That's a 10-point jump between transparencies. It is very common to be like, I need to be like in the middle of those somewhere, right? So primary trans 15, right? So we use HSL in Automatic CSS, so we're gonna write an HSL function. And there is a var for this called primary HSL, which references the bulk of the HSL string, which is your hue, your saturation, and your lightness values, because transparency exists separately from those. So then I can go / 0.15. I have now just created a custom transparency called primary trans 15 that I can go deploy anywhere. It's that simple. And the reason I'm using this variable and the reason this variable exists is because you don't want to lose connection with the primary color. If the primary color changes, this transparency needs to also change, right? Okay. So I'm using the variable primary HSL because these reference the primary color. So if the primary color ever changes, this transparency will update also. You never want to use static values in these things. So now let's come down and say primary custom shade, okay? And obviously you would name it something better, but I'm just showing you here how this would be done. So instead of primary HSL, which I don't have any control over, I need to break that down even further into the hue, saturation, and lightness, okay? That's what HSL stands for. So I go var primary H. See how this is just, it was HSL up there. If you break out into each part, it's just each part by itself. So then I go, and you don't even need the commas anymore. So we go primary S is gonna reference the primary saturation. And then I go primary L, okay? So now I'm gonna close that off. And now you have two options. One is you can, and saturation could be affecting your shade. Most often it's gonna be the lightness value. It could be both though. Okay, you could in this instance replace this with a static value. And so let's say your ultralight was 90 and you want one even lighter than that. You might want to call it ultralight or something, or I don't know, come up with your own name. But you could use a static value of 95%. So I can use a partial to reference my hue, a partial to reference my saturation, and then just come up with my own lightness value. That's one option. Or if you wanted it linked to your current lightness value, all right, so you could say primary L, if I can write, and then you would just take this and actually stick it into a calc, okay? Yes, I do want to allow pasting. Thank you, I'll just do it this way. So you guys can see that happening. So calc, primary L, and then I can say, you know what, I want it to be 15% lighter or something like that. So times 1.15, that would make it 15% lighter. Or you could make it 15% darker, right? With a division instead of a multiple. So you can multiply colors with calcs, if you didn't already know that. Now this keeps it linked to your primary's lightness value. So if your lightness value ever changes, your new custom shade that is lighter or darker than that is going to change with it, and it's going to stick it relative to that. This, in my opinion, is probably better than just sticking a static value there, because that static value is completely independent of whatever else is going on in the color system, whereas using a calc actually keeps it perfectly linked to whatever else is going on with your other shades. So there's two different ways to do it. It's obviously, if you know this process or you read the documentation, it just takes you 5 seconds and you can put one in there. And again, I would say, and you can even do this, custom shades and trans like that, okay? And this is gonna give you, as you start to build out more of these comments, a way to navigate your comments better, find different areas of your code. But this keeps your dashboard clean, and all of your custom stuff that's obviously for this project only lives right here, okay? And so the dashboard doesn't get cluttered up with a bunch of custom stuff going on. It's just all right here, and you're good to go. All right. Let's see. Okay, I followed the musical type scale ratios for years and was excited when I found them in earlier ACSS versions. Do you ever really use any ratios besides the ACSS defaults nowadays? The defaults here are so sensible that often I don't change them, okay? Like these ratios right here are just very, very, very sensible. They're not extreme, they're not radical. They give you a really nice hierarchy of heading and text levels. If you're given an extreme design, that's where I would change it, okay? Versus overriding every size independently. I don't really wanna be in that business. So I do change it when I'm given a design that is more radical. Now, what you will often see on websites, and all I do all day long is like, I go to lappa.ninja is one of my favorite spots. And they update this very, very frequently with new scenarios or new examples. So I'm gonna let me go back. I clicked the wrong button. Go back. Okay, thank you. If you click the icon here, you'll be able to open directly. All right, so here's a good example. So we're looking at the typography here, and what I typically get away with is I would immediately, looking at this typography, just increase my base size, because I can just see text on the site is very big. It's bigger than normal, right? So that's where I would go in and I would adjust my base size for text. So instead of 18, I might go 20 or 22 or something like that. And then headings, I would say, all right, headings are obviously very large as well. My base heading size would go up. That would probably be the first thing that I would look at adjusting. Then I'm looking at the ratio between them, okay? This is like the base text. I see this as like the base text, but when I look up here, this is obviously much larger. This is where I'm gonna go with a text L, right? I'm gonna say, all right, this is gonna be large text right here. And I don't think once I've increased my base size to get from this to this, that looks to me like maybe a typical L jump. But if it's not a typical L jump, I might bump up the ratio just a little bit to make that jump happen. And then I'm pretty much dialed in. I'm dialed in on this website. Now, what you will often see is a hero heading that is well outside the scope of the ratio that's going on everywhere else. And in that scenario, I would just override the H1 size. That's it. And I would leave everything else on the scale. And you'll just see some of these things happening. One, because a lot of designers actually don't use math scales when they should. And so if you're working with a designer that just randomly chose a bunch of shit, then you're either gonna have to say, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna use a scale. Or you're gonna have to randomly choose a bunch of shit to do what they did, right? Which you can do in automatic CSS. But it's better if the designer you're working with actually uses scales appropriately, and then you can just match the exact scale they used and everybody's happy, right? So it really is just what did the designer do? And then you need to make a decision based on that. Okay. Can you explain how to use the animated gradient? Yes, but maybe at the end, because it's a less important, less like used thing. We can do it at the end. We'll get to I'm trying to prioritize the questions here. Back to Brave because of the arc stuff, yes. Which cases not to use the utility class for BG colors? Because I've noticed in some cases it conflicts with the colors of the text and headings if automatic color relationships are also used. Which cases not? Oh, yeah. The utility class for BG colors. So you're not gonna get a relationship when you just straight up reference a class color name, right? Even if it's ultra dark, okay? This is not gonna trigger. Now we can look into extending color relationships to these. But like I said earlier, you wanna avoid this anyway, because you're referencing a specific color when you could have just said, I want an ultra dark section here, right? And have a theme that uses primary ultra dark as the default for ultra dark sections. Now, if there's a scenario where it's like, no, we really need like an accent background here that's not really being used in any of these other scenarios, then you go ahead and use BG accent, ultra dark or whatever, and you don't get the benefit of the color relationships. You have to do it manually like you've done in the past. But again, those are one-off scenarios that you're managing. And my argument is the auto color relationships with the contextual background utility classes takes care of 90% of what you're doing and saves you a tremendous amount of time. You can't then say, well, when I have to not use that system, it's a real pain in the ass. Yeah, because before the system existed, the other 90% that we took care of for you was also a pain in the ass. That 90% is no longer a pain in the ass. Only this 10% is a pain in the ass. So it's still a tremendous improvement from where we used to be and how we used to do things. We can't discard it because it didn't get me to 100%. I mean, it took care of so many problems and headaches on all these other areas. This one section you might have to do manually, and that's fine because you used to have to do it all manually, and now you don't. So that's kind of how that's explained. Now we can look into extending it to these other utilities, but there's many things that have to be considered. Okay, and so it's gonna be another step in the process. I'm gonna experiment with it. If my experiments start to pan out, I'm like, okay, I think this might be doable. Then it goes into experimental and everybody else gets to play with it. And then it has to graduate out of experimental. So that's kind of the process that we go through right now. Okay, let's see. Can you show us how to use ACSS within Gutenberg? I know it's possible. What's the workflow and interface like? We can. It's not a big request. The thing you have to understand about Gutenberg is that because there's no class system in Gutenberg, you are relegated to like custom classes that you can style. You're relegated to utility classes. And now you're in a utility first workflow, which you shouldn't really be in. You should be trying to avoid that at all costs. If you're gonna build with Gutenberg, because of the way they've done things, I would recommend you have to follow their path, which is custom blocks or block overrides or whatever. Now, with Etch, this is not going to be a situation you have to worry about at all because Etch is going to author everything into Gutenberg for you and do it properly and open the door to their block overrides and all of that stuff that they do natively. Etch is going to handle all of that for you. So I would stay out of Gutenberg as much as possible. In the meantime, I would be doing things in bricks. I would be doing things with like just blog posts and rich text content is essentially the extent of what I would do in Gutenberg for right now until Etch is available. It's just it's not built for the kind of work we're supposed to be doing. It has way too many limitations and it's way too proprietary and it's way too experimental and it's not great. Do you have a list of these colors in ACSS, text, dark, etc.? That's the beauty. Okay, there's dark, ultra dark, light, ultra light. That's all you need to know. If it's a background, it has BG. If it's text, it has text. There's 4 things to remember. That's it. That's the beauty of it. It's simplicity, right? It's guardrails. There's not much to memorize. Dark, ultra dark, light, ultra light. That's it. Okay. And people will see that as there's 4 options. There's actually not. There's a 5th option, which is your default website background color, right? If I want a white section, I wouldn't color it at all. I would just leave it because my default is white. So, there is that 5th option. Let's see. Regarding the button indicator, he's probably talking about the ACSS setting when changing hover. Yeah. A few people have nitpicked this icon, for example, this arrow. It's a cursor. It's what it is. Like you put a cursor over something and you're going to hover it, right? If you have a better icon idea, we tried a couple there. We tried a little mouse icon. We tried this was the cleanest. I mean, it tells you what it does when you hover over it. So yeah, it's, I don't know. It gets the job done. It should be obvious. Okay? Once you've been told what it is, especially, your brain should remember that fairly easily, but I don't know. If you have another icon that you think, no, Kevin, this is the this is the globally accepted hover icon. Okay, all right, we'll look at changing it, okay? But nobody's really given me one yet, so. All right, the ACSS button panel has color swatches for button action. Any plans to not show those if button action is not being used? I found it confusing the first time I saw it. No, it actually doesn't. Well, first of all, you shouldn't really be using action because it's deprecated, right? But if I turn on secondary and I go to buttons and links, you're gonna see secondary there. You go to option and just say, I don't want secondary buttons. So you turn off secondary buttons and look, it's not there anymore, right? Now, we have to give it as the option once you activate the color, right? Because you could very well use it for buttons. It's your job to go in and say, because what people will do, you got to put yourself in other people's shoes. And this is what we have to do all the time, is we have to say, what is the most common scenario? Because there's never a 100% of the people think like this, right? If I activate a secondary color and then I want to use it for my buttons, what would I do next? I would go to the buttons panel. It's not there. Oh, why can't I use it? And then they freak out. They start panicking, right? But if it's already there, okay, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. You know what I'm saying? So if it's already there, they can be like, oh, cool, it's there. And they start configuring it. And then they come along and they're like, oh, there's another scenario where they go, oh, I actually don't need those buttons. Okay, well, one, it's not gonna kill you to ignore it. But two, you can then take the step of turning it off. So you just turn it off and now it's not there, right? But that's better in my estimation and in the tests we've done. It's better, more often people may want to use it than be like, oh, I don't want it there. But even if they don't want it there, they can get rid of it. But it's there by default because that's the most common scenario where we don't want people to panic because they're like, dude, I turned on the secondary color. Why aren't secondary buttons available to be styled, right? That is how we're gonna get yelled at. You're gonna get us yelled at, okay? The bottom line. All right, when did the default line height change? I've personally never seen that format and only ever used or seen im or rem for line height. Can you explain the pixels.ex format and why? I have explained it. I understand that people can't keep up with every video and every piece of documentation. I do believe that it's, let's go to docs. I do believe it's outlined in the docs. This is a more modern approach to doing line height. I've said time after time, CSS constantly progresses and we find better ways to do things. One big problem with the old way of doing line height. Let me search for line height and see if it comes up. I know it's gonna be in the typography section if it's in there. Default typography styling. Okay, let's just do whoa, what are you doing? Line height, here we go. All line height, set line height. What is this link to? Okay, so let's go down here. Here you go. Default line height, smart line height. ACSS uses what we call smart line height. Okay, so this is an example of people are always like, can you update the docs? And I'm like, yeah, if people use the docs, we'll update the docs. Okay, so it is explained in the documentation why we do this. Now, I'm gonna give you the quick rundown. If you put 1.5, right? The smaller text gets, the more line height is required. And the larger text gets, I'm dyslexic, so I have to go very slow through this explanation. The larger text gets, the less line height is acceptable and actually desirable. And when you use a default value like 1.5 or something, it might look great on body text, but if you apply 1.5 to headings or something, because that text is bigger effectively, it's not gonna look good, right? And so what we use now, let me go back to the dashboard to show everybody, by default is a formula, 4 pixels plus 2 EX. If you know what EX is the height of the characters in the font, okay? So what this is essentially saying, and I think it's actually in half height increments. It's like 1 EX is half the height of the typical character. And they use like a placeholder character, it might be the O or something like that. And so what we're saying is, all right, equal the height of the font, but then add extra. And the extra is this pixel value right here. So this is the equivalent of the height of the font, and then we're just adding extra. And what this does is, regardless of the font you're using, and this is based on font families also, because the font family influences the line height, the EX takes this out of the equation. And so it's saying, all right, take the height of this font and then just add some extra to it. And that extra is static, which means it's always the appropriate amount. Because as the font size gets bigger, this EX value gets bigger with it, and then it adds the extra. So it always looks good almost across every size. This is a more intelligent approach to the old way of doing line height. So we put it in as the default. Now, if you want to override it, let me show you here. Let's get some text on the page that we can actually look at. So I'm going to do a heading, and we're going to make this a heading 1, so it's relatively big. And I think I can do some short in here. Maybe I can't. Okay, so let's do this. I just want it to be long. This is my very long and very large heading that probably most certainly spans some lines. Okay, there you go. That looks out of the box just fine, right? Just fine. And if I made body text, like it would look fine too. Everything would just look fine out of the box. But let's say you want to adjust it. Okay, you're going to come in. We could do this on, I think we just do this on all, right? So 6, 8, you're just adjusting the extra. That's all you're doing, just extra, right? Let's save there. So we did 12 pixels plus 2 EX. So it's like I kind of want some extra in my heading line heights, all right? Let's close the dashboard and let's get another heading in here, but this one will be an H2, okay? Very, very appropriate still. Very, very appropriate still. H3. This one's not going to, let's go width on this. We can force these to break. Okay, very acceptable still, isn't it, right? Let's do this. Let's make this an H4. Very acceptable still. It's like I just wanted more space in all of my headings, and I got it across all the heading levels without having to go, oh, well, that one looks good on that one, but not on this one, and then you adjust it on this one, and then you adjust. Why are you doing all that? Just use an intelligent formula that kind of just works out of the box, regardless of whether you want more breathing room or less breathing room. And now let's see it working all together, right? So let's say I universally want less. They all update, and they all still look good. It's fine. It's good, right? You almost don't need these individual line height inputs anymore. If you do it intelligently from the top down, or just apply to all with a formula that makes sense, it works really, 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 really well. It takes a lot of hassle out of line height. Okay, but again, I've seen people, here's the thing is, and I know it might be the natural reaction for some people, but people will open the dashboard and go, oh, what the fuck is that? And then they'll be like, no, back to what I'm used to. Back to what I'm used to, right? By the way, let's look at this here, okay? Not looking so good up here at 1.5, are we? Looking very appropriate down here at 1.5, not so much up here. This is a disaster. This is a disaster, right? But people see a formula that they don't recognize and they panic. And then they get rid of it. And it's like, hold on, just take a second. Go read the doc, understand what's going on there. You actually want that formula. You don't want to get rid of it, okay? Just take a second to learn it, right? So now I go back to the formula. Oh, nice. Rhythm, consistency has been restored, okay? So exactly, that's what we need to be focused on. Don't panic, right? People see backgrounds and text. Oh my God, I've never seen that before. Panic, turn it off, right? No, explore it. It's there for a reason. We don't stuff bullshit into the framework. We stuff things into the framework that's going to help you dramatically. So your first reaction shouldn't be, I don't understand, panic, right? Turn it off, get rid of it. No, your first reaction should be, hold on, let me take a minute, right? Or maybe I'll wait till Saturday or Friday evening or whatever, and I wanna just play with that for a minute. Let me read the doc, let me play with that for a minute, because chances are, it is there for a very good reason. We do not stuff nonsense into the framework. We don't just release features to release features, okay? That would be like the number one thing that is important to communicate in these live streams. Okay, is it okay to have mobile much larger than desktop? No, don't do that, no. And this is just answered by the internet. The internet should just answer this for you. Devices that are bigger need larger text than devices that are smaller, okay? So you want things to scale down. There's not enough room for the large stuff to be happening on mobile devices, right? So you want things to scale down as the device gets smaller. It doesn't make sense. As the device gets bigger, your shit gets smaller. That's not, that's backwards. And you will run into problems. Like you know, I guess the clamps will work, but it's just gonna be really weird behavior going on. And nobody's gonna know why, and it's just not gonna be a good scenario. Okay, the agency I get most of my work from gives me designs that are expected to be pixel perfect. Fluid typography and spacing freaks them out. Any tips to convince them to get on board? Yes, you sit them down in a chair and you have a little heart to heart and you say, I understand that you are very comfortable living in 2004, but this isn't 2004 anymore. Okay. And so we live in a world where there is actually a physical impossibility to create pixel perfection. Two different devices don't even render pixels the same way. Okay. This has actually been shown in experiment after experiment, that this idea of pixel perfection that you're trying to achieve is not physically possible. Now, the second area of this that we have to talk about is it doesn't matter because the visitor coming, eyes, like people's human eyes, they see ratios. They don't see measurements. The human eye doesn't look at something and measure it. The human eye looks at something and understands contrast and ratios, okay? And so you can make it pixel perfect so the designer can go, fuck yeah, I just love that. I just love that. Yeah, I use 16, you use 16, that's amazing, right? That's the only person that cares. The visitor they don't care at all. They don't care at all. What you have to do is make sure the ratios are the same. You have to make sure that the relationships are the same, right? But the pixel count is absolutely meaningless, And designers who claim that you need to make a pixel perfect, they are completely out of touch with the modern web. First of all, they're working in design tools that are not responsive. They don't have to deal with any device other than the one that they're sitting on looking at right now. That is the only thing they have to worry about. You have the job of worrying about every other device in existence. And so for them to dictate to you, no, it's gotta be pixel perfect. Well, I'm sorry, honey or sir, it ain't gonna work like that on the internet. We don't live in that era anymore. It's just, you have to accept reality, that is not the way that we work, and that is not ever gonna happen. And if you want it to happen, I can't work with you. Go work with somebody else. Point blank, end of story. We're not even gonna entertain that because it's dumb. It's dumb to entertain 2004 and 2024, okay? People have to move on. And so you're working with a designer and you can send them this video, you can clip this and send it to them. I'll just do the talking for you. They are completely and utterly out of touch with modern web design. Period, end of story. Therefore, their opinion gets thrown out. Okay, hopefully I wasn't unclear. Do you cut out in all buttons on the site within the dashboard? No, you would just add it depends on how you want to do the cutout, probably a mask. And you would just go into custom CSS. Here's how you could do it right here very easily. Oh my gosh, come on. All right. Got a little, I think, what is that like? Is that Notion down there trying to peek out? What is that? All right, let's go over here. Let's go custom CSS. If you want to select every, and this is a benefit of the double dash syntax that we use in Automatic CSS. If you want to select every button, regardless of its color, family, whatever, here's how you do it, okay? You use an attribute selector that looks like this, class, star, equals, and this is looking for any class that contains whatever you're about to tell it, okay? So now we go quotes. What do all buttons in the ACSS system contain? They contain BTN, but what do they also, because you don't want to accidentally select some third-party button that uses the BTN class. And if you did a dash, that would actually still select all third-party buttons that happen to have a dash in them as well. But Automatic CSS uses a double dash syntax, which means we can safely select all ACSS buttons by adding that second dash. And you have just now selected every button in the system. And now you would just do your mask, right? Whatever you want to do here for your mask. And that would if it's a cutout, cut out all of your buttons instantly, right? And all buttons you add in the future would instantly be cut out here. So this is how you select all buttons in the system. All right, let's see. When I import frames, the spacing is massive. Some of the sections in frames, var space XL for their vertical padding. It's stupidly large. My ACSS settings are the same as your blueprint video. You have to give me an example of one of those frames that are doing that. It depends on the frame and what was trying to be achieved at the time. It also probably depends on the age of the frame, though we have gone back and swapped almost all of them to contextual spacing. But yeah, give me an example frame and I'm happy to load it in. All right, let's go back and do some frames stuff. I'm gonna go into the chat, just check on the chat real quick. I hate getting out of touch with the chat. Okay, 2024, yeah. Okay, let's see. All right, everybody liked the rant on on pixel perfection. Okay. Can we make that icon a tiny bev? Yeah, yeah, we could. And when you hover over it, she can make a face like, spook you. Okay. All right, good. All right, I think we're good. Let's answer some frames questions. Let's move on to frames territory here. All right, I think we passed some. Let's go see if I can find them again. Can you go over how to set colors on a menu, please? It's completely all stuck. Can you please show how to use the frame slider Juliet? Okay, frame slider Juliet. Let's go look at it first. Let's go to frames and let's go to Juliet. Whatever they've done, so people need to ping bricks and just like whatever you've done to the library recently, undo those commits. It takes forever to load now. It takes forever to insert frames now. I don't know what they've done. Oh, here's slider Juliet right here. Okay, so this is not a section frame, so it's just gonna be inserted without any wrapper. And if you happen to do this, you can just right click and go wrap with a block or wrap with a section or wrap. I would actually wrap this with a container. Grab the container and wrap it with a section. And now you've gotten it to be inside of proper structure. Okay. I didn't import the images apparently when I did that. So let's try that again. All right, Juliet. There's slider Juliet. I'm gonna toggle import images to see if we can get some placeholders in here at least. And that's the other thing that's been happening is it's refusing to import the placeholders. Okay, let's go. What did you ask about this? I'm not sure how to use the dynamic data part. Brendan and Tobias tried to help, but they said it needs to be redone or something. Okay, let's look at the slider thumbnail. Okay, because this is using a double slider. It's using a slider for the main slide and a slider for the thumbnails also. So thinking in my brain, we do have one slide in there already. There's already a query loop on there. This is for posts. Okay. Do I not have any posts in this install? I probably don't. Let's just add a couple posts. Let's go to posts, add new post. Okay. Test post. And let's go to, I hate how they move this sidebar around. All right, let's go insert this image and go publish, add new post. Another post, this one, and let's do another post. We're gonna have to add like 5 of them because I think that's the minimum. A third post, okay, put this in. Now I'm doing it randomly, so I don't know which images I already added. Add new post, 4th post, featured, watch. Okay. And of course, because we live in a CMS that is from 2004, you don't get any previews on this page of what you've done with your featured image. This one already has one. Okay, so I think we have 5 in the system now. Let's go back to the builder and let's refresh. Yes, I want to reload. Okay, image no longer exists. All right, well, that's the wrong image. It should probably be featured image. And then let's come down to this thumbnail slide, media, get rid of this post ID, and do featured image here as well. Okay, and save. I don't know why dynamic data would be empty. Let's go to the front end. What is it pulling? Oh wait, did the main loop get done correctly? Let's look at this main slide, query, posts. Oh, this is, okay. This is set to query me. Oh, this is from a happy files category. Yeah, okay. The way this loop just needs to be set up differently. Yeah, I think that this is gonna fix it just by getting rid of the post type. Okay, I think what happened on that frame, so clearly it works, right? So I think what happened on the frame is for when we have to take screenshots of it, we like to make it pretty. And so I set it to query from a happy files folder because I didn't have posts to use. I just needed images in here real quick. And then when I published the frame, I forgot to undo the happy files thing. So we can go back and fix it. But with a little inspection, you can see I figured out, oh, I see what's going on, right? It's not actually pulling the posts. It was pulling media instead of actual posts. And then down here, it was pulling from a folder that doesn't even exist on this install. So you just clear out those things and then it just comes back to life. But I will make a note, or Andrea, if you're still in here, make a note for slider Juliet. We just need to fix the source frame to not be pulling from happy files. Okay, all right, glad we could sort that out. I'm looking for other frames. If you have frames questions, put them in now because we're into the frames territory here. Okay, hover states, we did this, we did this, we did this. Follow the musical type scale. Okay, we did that. I'm not seeing any other, I'm not seeing any other frames questions in the old area. So the background, where's the recipe? Let's use ACSS forms. How to style WS forms in ACSS. It's very easy. There's just one thing that people miss, okay? And I'm gonna show you what people miss. Everything else should be fairly straightforward. I'm gonna show you the thing that people forget. All right, so because if you forget this, you'll have no idea what's going on. First, I need a form. So let's go back and let's create one real quick. All right, so we'll go to WS form, forms, click to start. I'm a developer, skip this, get started, contact us, use template, publish, and refresh. Did it publish? Okay, form. WS. Okay. Oh, it's already there. Okay. Form, contact us, save, and we'll go to the front end. Okay. So there's a form right there, and people will be like, all right, I added a WS form. All right, and we're going to go to Automatic.css, and they're going to come over here, and they're going to go down to form. And obviously, you want to make sure that the load forms is on, right? Then you have default styling, light styling, and dark styling. Your default styling is things like text size for the label, spacing, yada, yada, yada. Stuff that is not related to color, right? Anything related to color is gonna be in your light styles and dark styles. And so if we go to label, you can see I can change the text color, background color, the asterisk color. But in default, when I go to label, what do I see? Text size, spacing, label position. Because these are unrelated to color, right? This is stuff that applies to both dark forms and light forms. Now, you might go to label and be like, all right, I'm gonna go, let's go label. Why aren't they getting bigger? Why aren't they getting bigger? Because the form doesn't know, ACSS doesn't know you want us to affect that form. The only way we want that you tell us, hey, style this with ACSS, is if you use the form utility class. There's only two of them. One is light, one is dark, right? So you can say, okay, form light. Now, and notice it snaps into action with all the defaults, okay? So now we can go to the front, we'll reload. So now I have a situation where I can come down to form and label, and then I can start, now I'm in control. Now I'm in control. So if you forget the utility class that needs to be placed on the form, nothing will work, right? But the minute you use that utility class, everything else will work. And now everything is very self-explanatory or live previewable. And that's the benefit of live preview. It's like you can see what the thing you're changing is doing while you're changing it. That makes it really easy to understand exactly what it does. So yeah, this is, that's the number one thing people honestly, when I'm working quick, I forget to do it myself half the time. I will pop a form in and then go, I want to start styling it. And then I'm like, oh, what a dummy. I didn't have the utility class. So this also, by the way, gives you the ability to style forms independently of ACSS, where it's like ACSS isn't automatically taking over all your forms. It is, you decide which forms get the ACSS styles and which might not, right? In almost all cases, you want them all too anyway, but it's still a little safer than us just taking over all of your forms. Okay. Is there a plan to make a page in frames to quickly check changes for ACSS like the yes. We're working on it. It's actually going to be modular this time. So we used to have a big UI style guide that you could add all at once. Now you're going to be able to be like, ooh, I like this color section. I'm going to add that. Ooh, I like this typography section. I'm going to add that. So it's going to be modular now, which I think is going to be a lot better. Okay, let's see. When you add the class or right click the input. I mean the swatch color panel from bricks. Hold on. Still missing it. I mean the swatch. Okay, you're asking a lot of, look, these are like partials of questions. I just need one question all together and then I can answer it. Okay, let's see. Using Gutenbricks for a project. Have some UI LI using GB there, of course, and post content element. Basic way to remove the smart spacing styling. I use pad margin inline, none important for now. I don't know exactly what you're asking, but if you ever need to remove smart spacing, it is just a utility class now. I'll just do it right here. Smart spacing off. You put that on a parent. You could put that on a whole page. You could put that on a parent box. You could put that on whatever you want to. It'll turn smart spacing off. Pretty simple. All right. And WooCommerce Frames layout page on the frame site doesn't load when we press the preview. It asks us to log in. Yeah, because Bricks can't load it unless it's assigned somewhere, and we can't assign it. We can't assign all of them to the same place, obviously. It's a limitation of WooCommerce Frames, not Frames, WooCommerce templates in Bricks. How do you style sure forms? Well, we haven't added sure forms yet, obviously, because it just came out, or I think it might even still be in beta. I don't know. But we can get there. If people request it and enough people request it, we can do it. We have plans to. It's just how soon do we do it? In footer mic, I want to make the text box on the right to scroll with the users as they scroll up and down. Sticky, is it quick to do that frame? Okay, footer mic. Here's the problem. I already know a problem with your question in general because you're asking about sticky in a footer. And sticky in a footer, now footers are attached to the bottom of the screen. There's usually not a lot of scrolling going on in a footer. So I'm already suspicious. Where am I, by the way? Bricks, blueprint, clone. Okay, all right. Let's do footer, publish. Okay, edit with bricks. So you want footer mic. There's footer mic. Yeah, I'm just not sure how this is going to stick. What is it going to stick to? Let's go from, I hate that setting that they changed on this. Our base text size, by the way, is obviously way out of bounds here. Let's reset those from our testing earlier. Okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. Okay, gotta close this WS form debugger. All right, yeah, I don't know. Okay, I mean, I suppose if you had like 80 rows of things, you could get into a scenario where this might stick. And this is obviously set to stretch. Let's see, footer mic inner, and let's align these to the start. Okay, now that's gonna fix that. Okay, so save. All right, so I mean, this would be rare. I mean, you're working on a website with a gazillion links maybe, but even still, look, I'm not gonna be able to stick that because top of the screen ends before it even touches the box. So the sticky is never gonna get activated. Sticky almost always requires like lots of other stuff below an element in order to be able to stick. So I would just say, I mean, footer mic's not an area where I don't see any plausible way that this creates a scenario where sticky could even exist. So yeah, I would try to do sticky somewhere else, not footer mic. Okay. AutoBIM is not working properly sometimes. AutoBIM created classes cannot be styled in bricks. Bricks folks say it's related to the global classes array, and ACSS it is a known problem. I mean, that's news to me. I haven't been part of any of those discussions. I'm still in the footer template, so let's get out of here. Let's just close this. Okay, let's edit with bricks. Close, 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 close. Okay. Div, heading, text. Okay, that's enough. P, K, div, BIM, test card heading, test card, text basic, whatever, apply. Okay, I see maybe what you're saying right here. This is gonna be because of the latest bricks update. Because I just updated bricks. This has been working for like, you know, my lifetime. since AutoBIM, because obviously I use it on every single project. It works on the front end, not the builder. This is a bricks issue for sure. Refresh. Well, now it works. Actually, I don't know what's going on. It's working now. There's been a lot of just preview stuff, adding stuff to the bricks canvas, and it doesn't show you what you're doing until you refresh the builder. There's delays. I'll tell you when it's been since. It's been since they tried to debounce everything for the lag stuff that was going on. It's working. Okay, you just saw it work. I just had to refresh the builder first. And that is unreal. I would say that's almost certainly unrelated to ACSS. So unless there's something else that I didn't just run into, that works just fine. Okay. I use footer mic on the non-footer part sometimes. Just want that type of layout in a page with links or downloads on the right with their resources. Okay. All right. Well, SK, I needed to know that. I was using the footer as a footer. Okay, so now we're on a regular page. We can go, let's say, section, section, section. Then we'll go footer mic, okay? So, and this is a good thing to make a point of, that you can, in fact, use frames outside of the context that they were designed for. You just have to tell the person who's doing the demo that that's what you were doing. Okay, so we're going to, I guess you have bunches of resources, okay? So I fixed the one issue, which is the stretching that was going on. You saw how I did that. So if you just kind of align everything to the start, it won't stretch anymore, because stretch is an alignment property. And so if you switch the alignment to start, it can't also stretch, right? Unless you use like a flex 1 or something like that. But now, now we're in a scenario where I can actually scroll past the item, which means that we could be in a sticky scenario here. So now what we're gonna wanna do is look at the structure. And actually, okay, so those things are not really part of the sidebar. They are part of, that's not really, that's a CTA. It's just labeled wrong in here. That's the CTA, okay? If you want the CTA to be sticky, we could go say, we could just try to do it right now and see if it breaks. I already see a potential problem with it. So let's go to sticky, and then your sticky, and then your top value. You need a top value. You can go with 0. And we do see that it is sticking, right? Now you might want an offset here. There is an offset in ACSS called offset, but it has to be set to something, right? But you could use a global offset if you wanted. If you're using a sticky header, you can do header height here as and that will automatically, look, see my header height is 0, so it's not offsetting it. But if you did have a header height set because you have a sticky header, this would automatically take care of that offset at the exact same time. It would match your header heights offset. So those are options for you. But as you can see, we've already achieved stickiness. Now you want to check this. The problem would occur, the problem that I was, foreseeing, let's go here, would be on mobile. Now, it's not going to be a problem because there's no other content. The sticky element is after. Let's switch this up and see if what I was thinking might happen actually happens. So you have your nav container and your CTA. What if the CTA comes before the nav? Then let's go on mobile. That's the problem this is what I was foreseeing would happen, right? So the way that you fix this, and really the safest way to do sticky, would be to wrap this. So we're going to take off the sticky off of here. So that sticky 0 that we did, take that off. Now it's no longer sticky. Wrap this with something, some sort of wrapper. And then you actually want the stretch property back. So you don't want these to align to center. You want that box to stretch because now that creates a channel. And what's going to happen is that wrapper is only stretching because it's in a flex container that allows it to stretch. But the minute these items stack on top, this stretch space it'll vanish. And your sticky element will be stuck, right? It won't be allowed, there will be no channel for it to slide around in. So this wrapper it's more safe to stickyify things inside of a wrapper than it is in a general structure grid, okay? So let's see now what happens. I go to CTA, and I actually do want the sticky here. I don't want it on the wrapper. The wrapper, no sticky. This is gonna be sticky and 0, whatever we wanna do. Notice it's still sticky, but watch this, cannot go anywhere. There's no longer a channel that exists because the wrapper that it's in is set to stretch, but there's nothing for it to stretch against because there's nothing next to it. So this automatically contains your sticky element. So you don't have to, if you're trying to I need to turn off sticky on mobile. No, you don't. You never have to turn off sticky on mobile. If you're in a situation where you have to turn off sticky on mobile, you did the structure wrong. You need a wrapper on your sticky element, and that wrapper will create a channel, and that channel will control the stickiness, okay? And if I'm talking absolute gibberish to you right now, you need to go to YouTube, type in Geary, type in sticky, and there are at least 2 tutorials that go through all of the structural requirements of sticky elements and the tips and tricks and how sticky works, and there's at least 2 of them that I know of. So you can go watch them and you'll be an expert on how sticky stuff works. Okay. So this is an example too, guys, of where, there's another way you can do this. Let's go back here of how CSS and ACSS work together, where you might say, well, you went and did in bricks, you did sticky and you did it manual and I didn't have to do that, okay? That was a choice that I made. And I'm gonna give you an example here, okay? So we're gonna go feature mic CTA, take off the sticky, and it's no longer sticky. There is a utility class in Automatic CSS. There, you could just slap sticky on there and magically out of the box it works. And if you had offset set or you had a sticky header with header height, it would automatically take care of that too. It's just a decision of whether you want to use the sticky utility class or keep this with footer mic. Keeping it with footer mic requires you to do this in here, sticky, which you could do, like I said, 0. ACSS comes into play where it helps you by, if you have a sticky header or if you need an offset of some sort, we have the ability to do that in Automatic CSS, right? Whether it's header height, whether it's offset, whatever you want to do, that's the helping hand. Even though I'm here in bricks doing something manually, I'm still referencing Automatic CSS stuff. And that stuff still exists for these scenarios, right? But what would the benefit of doing it here be? The benefit of doing it here would be Mr. SK said, I'm using that not as a footer. I'm using it, which means he might be using multiple of them. And if he has multiple of these sections, he's gonna want this sticky behavior to apply to all of them. This is a scenario where footer mic CTA values will apply to all of them automatically, but this sticky class will not. This sticky class only affects this instance of this footer mic and does not affect any other instance, okay? So that is where you make the decisions on utility class, or do I do this with a custom class, okay? All right. How are you finding out the header height since it can change based on device? Okay, so I did go over this. I've gone over this in ACSS 101 and I think in multiple videos, but you measure it, right? You measure it at each device size. This is why we go back to the front end as the easiest way to do this. And we'll just use this CTA as an example. So if you measure this CTA, pretend this is your header. I'm not gonna make a whole header and all that. Pretend this is a header. I'm measuring it. You see the measurements right there? It is 316 pixels tall. Or I can round up 316 to 317, or I can put in the decimal value if I really wanna be anal about it, 316.75. So I would open Automatic CSS and I would go to layout and I would go to header, okay? And I would say header height is 316.75, all right? Now look at that offset value. Look at what the sticky's doing. It's offsetting by the height of my header automatically without my input. It just did that. If I really had a header there that was 316 pixels, this offset would be perfection, okay? Now, obviously this is gonna be different at a breakpoint, right? So typically what I wanna do, we'll save that, and I wanna get rid of the dashboard for a second. And I wanna come find this again and inspect it here, okay? Still 316, but when it collapses, okay, let's see what it is now. Your header is gonna change, now it's 278. And you would find the breakpoint you're doing this at, right? And now you would put this new value in for that breakpoint. And the way I typically do it is I get the values for my breakpoints and I just type the values in here. So if like 768, what are you doing? Come on, Brave. Okay, 768, bang, that's my 768 breakpoint. Measure it, let's measure it. All right, 282.34, 282.34. Okay, so we come in here, all right, and we go down to that breakpoint. I think it's L 282.34. And you just do it for each breakpoint, you measure it, and then it's gonna work fine at every single breakpoint. Your offsets are all gonna work fine. Anything, your automatic content offset, like offset content automatically, that's gonna work fine at every single breakpoint. So you just manually measure it. We've talked about automatically measuring it. It is way harder and more technical than you would care to imagine. So it's just a little bit of a manual process right now. That's it. That's it. That's how you do it. Okay. Just curious, why would you use WP Grid Builder or Bricks native facets? I've kind of lost faith in the WPGB dev, poor support, poor communication overall. I switched to Bricks native facets just because I like not having that extra thing in my stack. And for the most part, I haven't run into any limitations. If I had to do very advanced things, I would have to go back to Grid Builder and use their facets. Okay. Want to remove specifically ULLI inline spacing, not all smart spacing. Important works, but just letting you know the selectors might be a bit too specific for smart spacing. No, it shouldn't be. What you're probably running into is this scenario right here. And then we're at our 2-hour mark, so we're gonna have to get out of here. But let me show this real quick. Very common scenario, very, very common scenario. So there is rich text, and we're gonna go in and put our bullets in, right? We'll just put some paragraphs in here. So let's do ipsum short, okay? There's a recipe from Automatic. We didn't even get to recipes, mixins, functions. I'd like for some people to start asking about those things, because those things are super fun and just crazy superpower value. But again, it's an area where a lot of people feel like, I don't know what's going on there. I'm just gonna ignore that area. Don't ignore it. Take some time to learn it, man. It's gonna be like your toolbox is gonna get so fucking like, you're gonna be scalped. Like it's the difference between like, I'm a general practitioner versus we got like brain surgeons over here, you know? Like the amount of stuff ACSS lets you do. When you just take the time to explore it just a little bit, some of these extra features, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I guarantee you there's some crazy problems you're trying to solve, and you're gonna spend 3 hours trying to solve them. And if you just looked in the ACSS docs, there might be one little thing and it's all solved for you, okay? Like sticky header offset content, stuff like that. People spend hours on that shit, and Automatic CSS like that fixes it, okay? So, and if you run into guys, here's the other thing. I want to know, if you ever spend 2 hours or 1 hour trying to figure out something in web design and you look in ACSS and it's like, oh, there's no solution for that, tell me what you just wasted a bunch of time on, because I will see if we can solve it. Those are the scenarios that I'm looking for, especially if it's a scenario where it's like, God, every site, this is such a headache. Let me know. I need to know about the headaches because then I can solve them, right? With automatic. That's what the whole point of automatic CSS. It's not like, oh, that's cute. Oh, no, it solves major headaches. Look how I'm ninja chopping. You remember I just ninja chopped that bottle. You remember ninja chop? Ninja chop's a fantastic video. You got to look up, it's Judy chop. I Judy chopped it. You look up, just take a minute out of your day and look up Judy chop and you'll get a nice little laugh. Okay. All right, let's make a list. We were trying to make a list. Before I started Judy chopping stuff off my desk, we were making a list. Okay. At Ipsum short. Okay, there we go. Let's just go over smart spacing real quick. I mean, this might be a good thing to do. Oh, I'm used to slash commands. I've been in Notion too much, okay? This is a level 2 heading. Let's go down here. Let's go, this is a level 3 heading. Okay. All right. Let's save. We'll just do that for now. Okay, let's go back to, I hate that goes back to the front end or the back end. All right, let's open automatic CSS. So smart spacing handles rich text, right? After clearing out all your other spacing so that you can use gaps, the second thing that it does is it handles rich text. This could be from Gutenberg, this could be from a rich text element, this could be from wherever, right? And this is very important because you have no control over anything in this element from this element. Everything in the style panel, other than general font size, which still, yeah, it's not even, that's the only thing you can do. Everything else, spacing, this layout, spacing, margin, garbage. You can't do anything, nothing is gonna affect the text in there. So the builder does not give you controls, but automatic CSS does give you controls. And so you go to spacing and you go to smart spacing, and now you're able to choose the spacing between all of your headings, your text and lists, and it's intelligent spacing. That's why it's called smart spacing, because it uses what is called adjacent sibling selection to apply the spacing. Now, you asked about lists. So this list indent, look at this. Look at what I'm able to do here, okay? And I can even do this with nested lists as well, separately down here. Nested list indent can be controlled separately. Let's go to list items, right? Look at what I'm able to do. Full control over the spacing between my list items. The list block, which is above and below, okay? Look at what I'm able to do there. I can even do 2 values. I can do a bottom nothing, top 5M. I can flip that around, 0, 5M. Now there's nothing on the top, there's stuff on the bottom. Or I can reference one of my other smart spacing variables for here, okay? I could reference my other contextual variables from here, which is the same. I can do container gap here. Look at that. That's my container gap right there. You could do your heading. Is it heading gap or heading spacing? There, it's heading spacing. You can reference anything you want to reference here. Okay, let's put this back to the default. So you have full control here. Now, if I set the list indent to 0, that would not be fantastic. What did you ask about this? So where'd the question go? Want to remove specifically ULLI inlines, not all smart spacing. Important works, but just, okay, so here's what you might have done. Well, because there's two ways to do this. Like, this is controlling globally on my site, right? If I go here, there's also a list none, right? Class. Now look what happens when I go list none. I think this is what you did. You tried list none on here, which also removes margin, okay, on the list. It makes a list not look like a list. That's what this does. It takes away the bullets, it gets rid of the padding, it gets rid of the margins, it makes a list not look like a list. Because when we do card lists, we don't want any list spacing. And so that's what list none does. But obviously that would not be appropriate here. What would be appropriate here is what I was just demonstrating, where you come to smart spacing and then you manage the lists from here. Now, if this is a situation where you go, but Kevin, this is a special list. And in this special list, which is not like my other lists, I really want to remove the indentation on the list items here. Okay, well, it's a special scenario. Automatic CSS is for typically global things, right? Or we have utility classes for one-off things. But this is a scenario where you're trying to do stuff that people don't normally want to do. So you just got to do it yourself, right? So you can come in here, root, select the UL. Okay, you probably want to do direct children maybe. And then let's see, what is it, padding that they have on it? There's your padding right there. And then obviously that doesn't look good. So you might want to go to 1em because, and then that's, you don't want it on the top and bottom. You want top and bottom to be 0. So now you're pretty much where everything would be in line, where it doesn't look like there's any indentation whatsoever. You can see like 1 pixel of indentation. If you wanted to be anal about this, you could remove that one. If you could type, you could remove that 1 pixel. That's actually maybe 2 pixels. Look at that. So you can go, yeah, a little calc situation might help you out there. Now there's perfectly no indentation, right? And that's happening on this one little list. So, and this is why I say it is important for you. Your goal should be to learn CSS so that you can just, oh, I see, little scenario. Now, if you don't want to learn CSS, you can't have all these special requests because it's not magic, okay? We work in an industry where you got to know what you're doing, right? If you want to do special things, you got to know what you're doing. Tools can do a lot for you, but they can't do everything for you. So here you go. Here's what you want to do. Can you include quote in the smart spacing? Yes, you can. Yeah, good question here. Let me get rid of that because I don't actually like the way that looks. I like my list to be indented. Let's add a block quote. Let's come down here and we will add a quote. Okay, look, no option to add a quote. Is it right here? Okay, block quote. I hardly ever use these rich text elements. Let's go ipsum short and let's take that ipsum and let's quote that ipsum. Okay, and now we're not going to be able, because the rich text elements are dumb. They're dumb. You can't get below it now. So you got to go grab this and put something manually below it in text mode. Okay, there we go. So now what we're going to do is refresh. There's a block quote. Look, smart spacing allows you under other to space out your block quotes. Look at that. So I can put as much or as little spacing around my block quotes as I want, which is very nice. Same thing for figure elements and picture elements and caption elements. Flow spacing picks up everything that's not defined. This is one of the best features, and this is, yet again, a feature that does not exist in any other framework, or system. This is proprietary to Automatic CSS, just like automatic spacing is, just like contextual spacing is, just like so much of this is. Why? Because we've identified, it's a very common problem, very headachy kind of thing to have to adjust all this manually. So why? Let's just fix that. And we fixed it. I don't want to affect all lists, only specific lists. Okay, good. So yeah, I've shown you how to do that. You can also maybe, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Is this a possibility? And then take away the padding, the margin block, just take that away. Right? Now take away the list style none, you'll get your bullets back. All right? So what did I just do? So we have, just like we have list none, remember that utility class? We have a recipe that directly matches it. And what a recipe does is it exposes the code for that utility. List none gives me the code for that utility. Here's Bricks again, failing to preview what we're actually doing. Okay, what did it do? Oh, okay. So this is supposed to be put on a list, right? So and it says, I didn't read my own comment. Begin list none. Change selector to root caret UL if using on a parent container or rich text element. It's almost like it's just documented for you if you read the documentation. So now you can say, okay, that's what I'll do. And then it does this. Now you have to decipher, shit, it got rid of my margin. Oh, look, that's what's getting rid of my margin. Well, let's stop doing that. It's getting rid of my bullets. Oh, List style none. That seems like it might get rid of the bullets, right? Let's get rid of that. And here we are back again with our scenario. And now you can put in your thing here, or even your calc. 1em minus 2 pixels. Minus 2 pixels. There you go. So there's my perfectly unindented list. And that time, a recipe got me to that conclusion, which if you didn't know the *ul thing that you would need to do, the recipe is a benefit because it has inline documentation in it that tells you what to do in a certain scenario, right? Fantastic. Let's pat myself on the back for that one. That's a good one. Just that documentation. You see how that documentation just came in right at the right time. It was like somebody thought about that, right? Somebody might use this on a rich text element. Okay, all right. Can you put a link in that rich text element? Well, yeah, of course you can. You just grab any text you want, click that, bang, got a link. There you go, right there. It is helpful if it includes the T on the end. All right, let's do I can override the CSS looking at that class, but newbies won't be able to, and exclude X selectors inside of postcon. Well, I just showed the recipe, so that does the job there. Exclude X selectors inside of post content from having smart spacing would be nice. You said you didn't want to get rid of smart spacing though. You can absolutely get rid of smart spacing on this element, right? If this is there you go. Look, there's all your smart spacing gone. Smart spacing off. Okay, now you could use a gap, right? You could use whatever you wanted to use. You got to change it to a flex. It's not a flex box. You have to change it to a flex box first, but you can remove smart spacing there. You can even come in here. But that's not a smart spacing thing, right? It's not a smart spacing thing. That's a one-off spacing thing. Yeah. So can we make our own recipes? You will be able to in Etch, and potentially in Automatic CSS in the future. It just depends, but yeah. If you're an ACSS user in Etch, you will be able to, for sure. Whether that comes to native, I mean, we want it to come to native ACSS for sure. It's just a prioritization issue at this point. Okay, last call for questions. Last call for questions. I will do one last one. I feel like we only did a couple frames related ones. Maybe there just weren't that many frames related ones, but if maybe somebody has a last frames related one. Oh, the overflow checker. Yeah. I don't know if it's in this version that I have. Let's go to options. Overflow detection. Okay. So yeah, this is, if you have an element that's overflowing, we can make this overflow real quick. So if you just come here, if you want to test this out, easiest way to make something overflow is to just make it 200 VW. And then you would also want to do this on the max width. Okay, so save. Let's also give this actually, let's not give it any other dimension other than height. Let's give it a height, 100 pixels. Okay, so there's gonna be something invisible. Look at my page, look at the scroll bar at the bottom. Scrolling, maybe if I put something else in here that you can see, it'll help. So here's a normal container. We'll put a background color on it. We'll give it a height. All right, and then we'll save, and then we'll go. There it is, but look, But wait a minute, what is overflowing? I can't see anything overflowing. This is very common with pseudo elements, very common in a lot of different scenarios. So you open Automatic CSS and you go to options and you go to other and you say overflow detection. Oh, look at that thing. What is going on there? There must be some other element that I can't see. Okay, let's go into the builder. And oh, it's this one right here. And then you go inspect. Oh yeah, of course, some dummy put 200 VW on here. You can't do that, right? So let's take that off. And now we go back and then we have no overflow. Overflow is fixed and you can verify it by going right back to options, other. You don't even have to save. You don't even have to save. You're just gonna get instant overflow detection. I can pin my dashboard if I want to. So yeah. It's a good feature. It's very handy. You're not going to use it like all the time. But when you do run into an overflow scenario where like, why am I getting horizontal scroll here? Very, 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 very handy. Kevin opened the API for that, and Maxime have been doing some tests Yes. We do have an API where other people can do it, but we do plan to do it natively, for sure. We just have to do it in the ACSS panel because Bricks is obviously not our builder. This is another reason why Etch exists, okay? There's so many things that we want to do to innovate modern web design. If you don't know, Digital Gravy's mission, right, is to transform the landscape of front-end development. We can't do that in everybody else's tool. And if you look at Etch and what we're doing in Etch, it is already so radically different from anything that any other builder is doing, and already can do things that other builders can't do. And we're a month and a half in, that you can just instantly see. Like, if we're going to define a new era of WordPress, we can't do that in other people's tools. So Etch has to exist, and so we can't do it. And even if we did it in Bricks, that's just dumb, because then we have to go do it in Generate, and then we have to go do it somewhere. Like, what, we're going to build a UI for custom recipes in everybody else's builder? That's just not making any sense. Now, we could do it in our own dashboard, right? So we could have a recipes area and then a whole UI for defining custom recipes. And yes, yeah, for sure, it's a shitload of work, but it will probably come at some point. It's just we have other goals that we're trying to meet right now. All right, that's gonna have to be it for this live stream. I'm running out of gas, I'm running out of steam. I will be back every month now that 3.0 solid, stable, great, fantastic. We're releasing new features. ACSS Live will return on a monthly schedule. So keep an eye out for this. And yeah, a lot more to come, a lot more questions to be answered, a lot more